The desert was wide enough to swallow a man-whole. Heat shimmered off the sand like glass from a broken furnace, every stone seemed to breathe fire. Somewhere between the dry ridges of Arizona and the last town marked on the map, Jonas Reed, a weather-tough cowboy, rode his horse until both were stumbling shadows in a world made of light. He hadn't planned to die that week. He'd set out with 2 canteens and a letter from a rancher who owed him pay. But the canteen split on a rock, his horse went lame, and the trail he thought would lead to water turned out to be nothing but wind-carved bones of cactus. For 2 days he walked, lips cracked, eyes full of dust, thinking only of shade. By the 3rd dawn, when the sun rose red and merciless, he saw a figure on the horizon, a small outline moving with calm purpose across the sand. At first he thought it a mirage, one of those cruel tricks the desert plays on desperate men. But as the shape drew closer, it became a woman leading a burro. She walked lightly, as though the heat were no enemy to her. Her hair was braided with copper beads that caught the sunlight. She carried a skin of water over her shoulder and a bundle wrapped in faded cloth. Jonas tried to speak but managed only a rasp. The woman halted, studied him a long moment, then stepped forward without fear. "You are lost," she said in careful English, her accent soft as desert wind. He nodded, half falling to one knee. She reached him just before he collapsed and caught his arm with surprising strength. "Come," she said, "you will die here if you stay." Her name, he later learned, was Taya, an Apache widow whose husband had once traded horses near Fort Bowie. She had been crossing the plain to bring herbs and salt to her sister's family. She did not hesitate to help a stranger, though she could see he was white and worn by the frontier's cruel politics. To her, suffering had no color. She led him to a dry ravine where a bit of shade crouched under a rock ledge. There she gave him small sips of water, slow, measured, so his body would not rebel. She tore a strip from her shawl, soaked it, and pressed it against his forehead. He tried to thank her, but she silenced him with a look that said strength wasted on talk was a fool's trade. The hours crawled, vultures wheeled high above. When he could finally sit up, she gave him a piece of hard bread and dried berries. "Eat," she ordered, "but little. We have far to walk before the next spring." Jonas looked at her with the awe a man reserves for miracles. She seemed carved out of the very desert, steady, patient, alive because she had learned how to listen to silence. "Why help me?" he asked. She shrugged. "A life saved is a life returned. The desert remembers kindness." That night, the wind turned cold. They shared a small fire built from roots and brush. Above them the stars burned so bright they seemed ready to fall. Jonas watched her tend the flame, her face lit gold, eyes fixed on the horizon. "You travel alone?" he asked. "My people are gone from these hills," she said simply. "But I am not alone. The earth walks with me." When he shivered, she threw a blanket over his shoulders. "Sleep," she said. "Tomorrow we follow the rocks east. There is water if the spirits have not moved it." And so began their slow march through the desert, a cowboy broken by thirst and an Apache widow guided by instinct older than maps. She taught him how to find shade beneath stone, how to squeeze water from barrel cactus, how to listen for the sound of night birds that marked where springs might hide. Each day the sun punished them, each night the cold tested their faith. When his strength faltered, she carried the pack. When her feet bled, he tore his shirt to bind them. Survival became a shared prayer spoken without words. By the 5th sunrise, a faint green line appeared in the distance, cottonwoods, and beyond them the promise of a stream. Jonas laughed, a cracked sound that startled even himself. Taya smiled for the first time, the expression quick and radiant like morning light on steel. "We will live," she said, "because we did not surrender." They reached the water at dusk. Jonas dropped to his knees and drank until the world steadied. Then he looked at her, the woman who had carried him through fire and silence. "I owe you my life," he said. Taya shook her head. "The desert took your pride and gave you breath. I only showed you the path." In the fading light, as they built a small camp and the sky turned orange behind the cliffs, the cowboy understood that survival in the Wild West was not just the story of guns and grit, but of grace found in the hands of strangers who refused to look away. The next morning, golden sunlight spilled over the cliffs like liquid fire. The desert, once a furnace of death, now looked strangely peaceful, every rock glowing, every cactus casting long gentle shadows. Taya walked ahead, her steps firm, her braid shining like copper under the sun. Jonas followed, still weak but alive, each breath reminding him he owed this Apache widow his second chance. By noon, they reached the edge of a small frontier town, a cluster of wooden shacks, a livery stable, a saloon, and a church with a broken bell. People stopped what they were doing the moment they saw them. A white man and an Apache woman walking side by side. Jonas felt the stares, sharp, heavy, judging. He'd lived long enough to know how quick a western town could turn cruel. He glanced at Taya, but she walked steady, head high, as though she'd crossed through worse deserts than human hate. "Stay behind me," he whispered. Taya looked at him. "I am not afraid." They passed a group of ranch hands leaning against the fence. One spat in the dirt. Cowboy got himself a squaw nurse, he muttered, loud enough for all to hear. Another laughed. Guess the desert wasn't the only thing he was thirsty for. Jonas stopped. His fists clenched, but Taya placed a calm hand on his arm. "Let them talk," she said softly. "Their words cannot burn like the sun." They reached the doctor's shack, a narrow wooden building that smelled of herbs and whiskey. The old doctor blinked when he saw them. "She saved me," Jonas said. "I wouldn't be standing here if not for her." The doctor frowned. "You bring her in town, you'll stir trouble, Reed. Folks don't take kindly to." "She's coming in," Jonas interrupted. "Anyone got a problem can talk to me." The doctor sighed but nodded. He treated Jonas's cracked skin and fever while Taya waited silently by the door. When they left, a small boy ran up and offered Taya an apple. She smiled and placed her hand on his head. His mother rushed out and pulled him back, glaring at Taya like she'd touched poison. That night, they found shelter in an old barn at the edge of town. The sunset painted the world in warm orange light, the kind that makes even pain look holy. Jonas sat beside her, watching dust float in the beams. "You could have left me to die," he said quietly. "I do not leave people," Taya replied. "Even when they would leave me." He looked at her hands, strong, scarred, gentle. "You could stay here," he offered. "I could talk to the rancher. You'd have work, food, a roof." She shook her head. "This is not my home. The land calls me back." Jonas wanted to speak again, but something in her gaze silenced him. The kind of silence that isn't empty, it's sacred. When dawn broke, she was already gone. Only a small pouch of dried herbs and a single feather remained beside his saddle, her silent farewell. He stood at the barn door, the morning sun washing his face in gold. He realized then that he had met strength purer than any he'd seen on the frontier, not the strength of gunpowder or pride, but of mercy. And when the townsfolk whispered about the Apache woman who'd vanished into the desert, Jonas Reed simply said,